So in our current theme at Sangha Night, we've been exploring the mandala of the 5 Buddhas and how they relate to the 6 paramitars, the perfections. And tonight we're going to continue to dwell in the Eastern realm of Akshobya. And we're going to look at how he relates to this quality of kashanti that Vidanya mentioned a couple of weeks ago. So last week, Dharma Mai introduced us to Akshobya, and they drew out some of the imagery associated with Akshobya and his qualities. And we've got this beautiful blue shrine here, which, really evokes Akshobya, I think. Yeah. So Akshobya is the cool blue Buddha. He's sitting in the eastern realm of the mandala, and his name means immovable or imperturbable. And I think you get a deep sense of stillness, groundedness, and equanimity by looking at him. He's unshakable. Nothing is going to rock him. And as we heard last week, all of the 5 Buddhas are associated with a particular wisdom and a particular poison. So Akshobya transforms the poison of hatred into his mirror-like wisdom. Yeah. So I'll say more about that later on. So there's a myth. I'm just trying to work out that I need to look at the camera. Sorry, I'm just getting my, I'm not savvy to this kind of stuff, but I think when you're on telly, you have to look at the camera, don't you? But I just want to look at you guys, so it's a bit confusing. Anyway, apologies, I'm probably not doing it right. So there's a myth related to Akshobya, and it tells us how he came to become the Buddha Akshobya and how he came by his name. So eons ago, so in a time outside time, there was a monk, and he lived in the land of a Buddha called Vishalaksha. And this monk, all he wanted was to gain enlightenment for the behalf of all beings. So, but Vishalaksha said, well, it's pretty difficult, you're going to have to forsake all anger to become enlightened. And when I say all anger, I mean even the most minor irritation. But luckily, he was very, very determined. Yeah. So anyway, after many, many years of practice, probably many, 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 many lifetimes of practice, the monk became unshakable. And he was eventually reborn into the land of Abhirati, and he became the Buddha Akshobya. So this gives us a little bit of an idea of what kashanti is and how we can develop kashanti. So it's something about being unshakable. Yeah. So how did he manage to overcome all this anger, irritation? How did he transform it into his mirror-like wisdom? Well, no doubt he used the paramitar of kashanti. And you're probably all going, well, what is kashanti? What does it mean? Well, Vidanya told us last week it's the 3rd paramitar, the others being generosity, ethics. I'm looking at Edward now. It's Edward's cue to get the list of paramitars up. The others being generosity, ethics, energy, meditation, and wisdom. And it's the 3rd paramitar. So, yes, there we go. And it says patience, doesn't it? So the paramitars, just to remind you, are, well, one translation is perfections, but I mean, skillful means is another way of translating them. It's how we, if we use these skillful means, we can use them in service of getting enlightened, basically. And how we develop them is described in detail by Shantideva in the Bodhicharyavatara. So I'll be drawing quite heavily on Shantideva's advice. But what does kashanti mean? Well, Sangha describes Kshanti as the most beautiful word in the whole Buddhist vocabulary. And I think it is a beautiful word, actually. I mean, Kshanti, it's a beautiful word in itself, but it also describes a beautiful act, a beautiful thing that we're doing with our mind. But like many words in Sanskrit, it's not easily translated into English. So sometimes it's easier to say what it's not rather than what it is. So Sangha describes it as the total absence of anger, hatred, or desire for revenge. In English, it's often translated as patience, but it doesn't really do it justice. It also encompasses the qualities of forbearance, acceptance, tolerance, and also receptivity as well. But there's also strong elements of love and compassion in this quality as well. So it's a big word, yeah? It's not just patience, it's kind of more than that. And I think it's really important to say it's an active quality. It's not at all passive. So as Vidanya said a few weeks ago, it's the practice of staying in positive mental states. And that actually takes a huge amount of effort. If you think, you know, in the course of a day, a week, how many times we can slip into a slightly negative state and how much effort it takes to stay in a positive state all the time, that's what Kshanti is. It takes effort. It takes effort in the face of difficult conditions, difficult circumstances, to remain positive. And in particular, it's the practice of not reacting angrily when something or somebody irritates us or does something to annoy us. It's the practice of finding the gap that leads us to freedom, rather than following our habitual reactions into anger and irritation. So when we're faced with a negative or painful stimulus, or Vedana, we don't immediately push it away, and often the person causing it. We sit with the painfulness or irritation and we choose to do something different. We look for the gap, yeah. And this takes a great deal of effort, particularly to break our habitual reactions. It takes a great deal of effort to sit with patience, Kshanti, when a difficult or negative thing has happened, or someone has done something we don't like. Yeah. Okay. So it's a very active quality. It's something that we're doing actively with our mind. Yeah. I think it's also really important to spell out what Kshanti isn't, and to look at what we might call the near enemy of Kshanti. So Kshanti isn't a state of being just passive, because patience can sound a bit passive, can't it? Certainly that was my wrong view about patience. It's not about being a doormat, okay? It's not about letting people walk all over us, yeah? So sometimes we do need to take action to protect ourselves, especially if someone's hurting us or taking advantage of us. And sometimes we might even need to take legal action against somebody, okay? But the key is that we take care of ourselves without acting in anger or hatred or out of revenge, okay? So we're taking care of ourselves, we're setting clear boundaries, yeah? But we don't act out of anger or hatred, yeah? Okay. And here, I mean, I think these are my favorite Dharma lines. I'm going to quote the Buddha, Shakyamuni, from the 5th verse of the Dhammapada. And he says, hatred does not cease with hatred. Hatred ceases with love. And this is the eternal law. So I'll just say it again. Hatred does not cease with hatred. Hatred ceases with love. And this is the eternal law. And I particularly like that last bit of it. This is the eternal law. No arguments, really. Yeah? So we don't overcome anger and hatred by getting angry and hating back, yeah? Somehow we have to transcend that anger, and we have to reach a place where we can be loving and compassionate, even to someone that maybe has done us a great wrong, yeah? It's not necessarily an easy practice, okay? It's a pretty blooming difficult practice, but it is possible. So when I first encountered a kashanti, I think I had a lot of wrong views about it. I thought, well, one, I thought patience was boring. I thought patience is not for me. Patience doesn't get me where I want to be, which is over there or somewhere else, yeah. And I also thought that it was really good not to suppress emotions. You know, I really thought that it was good to get all my emotions out there, whether they be negative or positive. So anyway, you can imagine that I had quite a few problems in relationships for quite a number of years. My husband might still say that I still do. Anyway, yeah. But yeah, at least I'm working on it now. At least I'm going hopefully in the right direction. So yeah. So Shanti David talks at length about all the parameters and how to develop them. Yeah, and he says at the beginning of the chapter on Kshanti, he warns us against the dangers of anger and hatred. And these verses I took really seriously a few years ago. I had to really, really work on some difficult stuff that was going on for me. And these verses really helped me. So he says, all the benefits of spiritual practice, generosity, kindness, and truthfulness, all of them can be destroyed by one moment of anger. So it doesn't matter what you're doing in your spiritual practice. You could be the most generous, kind, tolerant, truthful person. But if you habitually get angry, people are not going to trust you and people are going to back away from you, okay? Yeah. So also, anger, ill will, and resentment are the most destructive mental states. There is no spiritual practice equal to Kshanti. Yeah. Thus, I should strive in various ways and with great effort to develop Kshanti. So Kshanti is seen as this key spiritual virtue, one that it's essential to develop. Yeah. I should strive in various ways and with great effort to develop Kshanti. Yeah. It's something that we should be doing all the time, no time off. Every minute of every day, we should be trying to develop Kshanti. Yeah. But anger can be very seductive. Yeah. And in particular, righteous indignation can be very seductive. We can feel quite powerful, especially if we feel like we're winning an argument and we're making someone else back down. And especially if we strongly feel that we're in the right. Or if we feel that someone's behaved very badly, it can be very satisfying when we see our enemies defeated or get their comeuppance. So I have to admit, I'm afraid I did feel quite delighted when Trump lost the most recent US election. Mainly because I was appalled by many of his policies, but it wasn't quite as clean as that, I'm afraid. I was quite delighted in the thought that he was going to be really fed up and not winning, So, yeah. So this is the sort of thing I mean that we can get. It can be quite seductive and we can quite like that feeling of irritation, anger, hatred, Yeah. So how do we work with Kshanti? How do we convert anger and irritability into the mirror-like wisdom of Akshobya? So, so maybe I should explain about this mirror-like wisdom a bit more. I think the basic idea is that when Akshobya views the world, he sees it with absolute clarity and objectivity. He can really see what's going on. He's not affected by his own conditioning. He's gone beyond conditioning. He doesn't have views or prejudices, yeah? So he's completely pure in the way that he looks at the world, and he sees it completely objectively. But unfortunately, when we see the world, it's as if our mirror is cracked or distorted or just plain dirty, you know? We can't see things with clarity because we've got too many biases and judgments and prejudices, yeah? So everything just is, we see it through a different lens, our own lens of conditionality. Yeah, so that's a bit about mirror-like wisdom. But coming back to Kshanti Deva, he says, we should practice Kshanti. He says, there's nothing which remains difficult if it is not practiced. So through practice with minor discomforts, even major discomforts become bearable. So he's saying just practice. Practice with the small things. Practice with the little things. And the more we practice with the little things, we build our muscle of Kshanti, if you like. You know, we get better at it and we can take on the bigger stuff. Yeah. So yeah, practice every moment, every day. No time off. So he says practice with the small things first. And this next line always makes me laugh. So the translation I've got is, the irritation of bugs, gnats and mosquitoes, of hunger and thirst and discomfort such as an enormous itch. Why do you not see them as insignificant? So I think that's really quite funny. You know, this enormous itch. Well, I mean, that it is irritable, isn't it? I mean, you know, I've got a mosquito bite on my ankle. It's blooming itchy. Yeah, so we have to practice with those minor discomforts. Yeah, bugs, gnats. Instead of sweeping them away, we just go, oh, a spider. Great. Okay. So if we can work with these little things, we can gradually build our patience and tolerance. He also suggests we work with the weather, which is a particularly good one for today, isn't it? Who's been feeling too hot and moaning today? It happens at work with us, I'm afraid, today. Oh, it was blooming hot. Anyway, but instead of complaining about it, it's too hot, it's too cold, it's too rainy, we just need to accept it as it is. So as the title of the talk says, it is what it is. Yeah, complaining about it will not change it. It certainly won't help. Why not be flexible and just enjoy it? So if it's sunny and hot, relax into it. Wear cool clothes, take your shoes off, you know, find a shady spot, enjoy the warmth in your body. If it's rainy, stay in, do something indoors, read a book, or get some waterproofs on and go out and enjoy the rain. You know, we just try and flow with it a bit more. We don't have to be so rigid and resisting. We just flow with it. So it's good to develop our patience with things as well. And in this modern world, we get plenty of everyday experience with developing Kshanti. And I'm talking about technology. Yeah. So how about reacting with Kshanti rather than frustration when our computer crashes? Yeah. Or when it keeps asking us for yet another blooming password, which we've got to remember and I can't remember it. Or when you lose connection during a Zoom call with work or a close friend, or when you're trying to watch the Sangha Night talk. Or what about when our mobile phone runs out of battery, or we don't have enough signal, or the app we've just downloaded isn't working? You know, there's so many everyday little things that we can work with. We can use it to develop our Kshanti muscles. Yeah. So once we've sorted out the little things, the bugs and the enormous itches and the people and the things, then we've got people, okay? And this is where it gets a bit harder, yeah. Because the problem about other people is they don't always do what we want them to do they? They just don't. So they don't behave in the way we want them to do. And sometimes they seem to act like they're the centre of the universe, when actually it's quite obvious that it's me that's the centre of the universe, you know. So if someone behaves badly to us, we can feel quite justified in feeling resentment and righteous indignation. We just do. We feel, they've behaved so badly. But we never think of all the times when we've been unaware or behaved badly ourselves and perhaps needed forgiveness ourselves. Why do we get on our high horse with them and have the tendency to blame and judge so readily? And yet if we were doing that, we'd kind of give ourselves a bit of slack, wouldn't we? Yeah. And in fact, other people don't even have to behave badly. They just have to do things in a way that is different from how we do it. Why have they done it like that? Don't they know that this is the way you do it? So we can immediately get quite irritated by this. Yeah. But Shanti Deva says, if we see a friend or enemy behaving badly, we should remember that their behaviour is caused by conditions, and we should not allow it to disturb our happy state of mind. And he goes on to say, if someone hits me with a stick, I don't blame the stick, but the person is wielded by ill will, just as the stick is wielded by the person. So we need to understand that the person is acting badly out of anger or frustration themselves, and we need to not add to that. So I think this thing about the stick and the person needs a bit of unpacking. So basically he's saying that people act in anger because of their conditions. If you're in difficult conditions, it may be more difficult to act with equanimity. Or if you have a habit of always being irritable and angry, then you're more likely to continue that behaviour. Yeah. But Shanti Deva says, well, we should get angry with the hatred itself, not with the person being angry. Yeah, it's almost like they're being wielded by the hatred. Yeah. Okay. And ultimately we just need to understand that unlike Akshobya, we don't yet have that mirror-like wisdom that reflects everything back clearly to us. In fact, our mirror is cracked or distorted. We only see a portion of the truth. Can't always see things clearly. Okay. So, moving on. Yes. So it's all very well, I think, to say practice with the small things and don't add anger to anger. But how do we actually do that? You know, how do we actually do that? And I think it's really helpful to break it down. I found this model really helpful anyway for myself. So, firstly, I think we need to use our awareness. So we need to be aware of our mental states. That's the first thing. If you're not aware that you're angry or irritated, if you can't actually sort of step outside of it and look at it and say, oh, I'm angry, then you're not going to have the wherewithal to kind of do anything about it. So we need to use awareness. And that's all about mindfulness, isn't it? It's about being mindful of what's going on for you. Yeah. So we use our awareness to identify that we're angry or irritated or blaming or judgmental. And then it's helpful to look underneath our initial reaction and look for any stories we have about the situation. So we need to examine the stories and try and see if they're actually true, or are they being distorted by our own conditioning. So here we're trying to move a bit closer to that mirror-like wisdom. We're trying to kind of be a bit more objective. Is this really true, or am I just exaggerating it in my head? Yeah, am I just exaggerating it because that's what I always do and that's what happened? with that other person way back when, and I've always distrusted that sort of person because of that, you know. So we need to look for the stories that we're telling us. We're looking for the prapancha, yeah. And then thirdly, we need to dig even deeper and see if we can get in touch with any other emotions underlying that anger and irritation. And often if we look closely enough, we'll find anxiety or fear underlying the anger. And if we can get in touch with the fear, then we can get in touch maybe with some sadness about it. Maybe it's a difficult situation and we're actually quite sad about it. And if we can connect with sadness, then we can often connect with compassion to the other person, yeah? So I've got a couple of examples. How are we doing for time? Okay, 5 minutes, yeah, great. So a couple of examples. I've just got back from Buddha Field, which was great. It was really good. It was really good. And I had a fantastic festival, and it was gloriously hot and sunny, and it was in beautiful Somerset, and there was loads of fabulous people there. So I loved it. I got a lot out of it. Very inspiring. But, oh my word, what a great place to practice kashanti. There's all these people there. All these people being annoying. So, yeah. So the bugs and the weather, they were all right. I could cope with that. As long as I found some shade, I was all right. Yeah. But the people. So my examples. So on the first evening, I was admiring this very well-organised recycling station. So they've got these recycling stations all around the site, and it's superbly organised. And the whole ethos is about not polluting the land, living as lightly on the land as possible, recycling as much as possible, etc., etc. Fantastic. I was right behind that ethos, fantastic. And I was just feeling like, oh yeah, this is great. And as I was admiring it, so they've got all these different bins, one for, you know, food waste, paper, plastic, you know, metal, glass, etc. And as I was admiring the system, this woman came along, didn't look at any of the labelling, got her single-use plastic bottle and bunged it in the paper waste bin. And I was immediately like, what have you done? What have you done? So in that moment, I was outraged. How selfish, how irresponsible. She obviously doesn't care. And before I knew it, not only did she not care, but actually loads of these people at this festival, they all look pretty dubious as well. They don't look like proper Buddhists. They just look like they're here to have fun and be hedonistic. So I was off on a rant. But luckily, I was preparing this talk. Okay, so luckily, I was able to go, oh, Prajnasri, you're feeling a bit angry. Okay, so yeah, so I stopped myself and realised that actually I had absolutely no idea what was going on with this woman. No idea. Yeah, she probably just arrived. On reflection, she looked a bit harassed. I thought maybe she's got a couple of kids back in that field and they've just been, you know, a real pain all the way down the motorway, you know. Maybe she's just going, oh my God, why have I come to this festival? Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what was going on with her. But yeah, there was no need for me to be so blaming and judgmental. And actually, when I dug a bit deeper, I realised that one of the reasons I was so irritated with her was she, at that moment, represented the mass of human beings on the planet and how we can all be pretty reckless with our overconsumption. And, you know, and as a result, the planet suffers. And I find that really, well, scary, upsetting, sad, you know. So I was able to connect with my fears for the planet and the environment, and I was able to feel compassion for myself and not overly blame the woman who threw the rubbish in the wrong bin. So that was one example. The second example was, again, right at the beginning of the festival. I did chill out quite a bit, I have to say, but I was a bit uptight when I got there. So I think the second day I was dealing with what I would call quite relaxed service in the cafes. Quite relaxed. So the queue was just incredibly slow. Incredibly slow. When I finally got to the front of the queue, the three young women serving there were, well, they didn't know what they were doing. They were incredibly inefficient. They had no system. They broke off from serving customers to have long chats amongst themselves. And they also chatted a lot to the customers. And with no apparent regard for the length of the queue. So I was quite wound up, really. And I didn't really want to chat to them when I got there. Anyway, so again, I went, oh, yeah, you're getting wound up again, Prajnasri. So I thought, well, actually, these girls are volunteers. They're not getting paid. They're volunteers. And they were a bit short on volunteers this year at Buddhafield. So they were having to work long shifts for a lot of days. And actually, if they weren't there, I wouldn't be getting any dinner in the first place. So, and they seemed to be having a really good time. You know, they were chatting, they were enjoying themselves, and they were chatting amongst themselves and chatting with the customers, and all the other customers actually seemed quite chilled out about it. So maybe it was just me. So, So then I was sort of I looked for the fear underlying it, and I thought, well, I don't need to be afraid of being late. I've got nowhere to go. It doesn't matter. I thought, well, maybe I'm a bit afraid that they're having a good time and I'm not. Maybe I'm a bit afraid that I'm on the outside of it. I felt a bit left out of the good vibe. So, so then I was able to connect with, oh, you're feeling a bit left out. You're feeling a bit not very relaxed. Okay. So I did manage to chill out and enjoy myself. And actually, the service did get better. So I don't know whether the boss of Buddhafield Cafe sort of got them a bit better organised. He probably did, I guess. Yeah. Anyway, so there we go. That's the end of my talk. This brief exploration of Kshanti and how it relates to Akshobya. And I think, my experience is if we can practice Kshanti more and more in our lives, then we can maybe get a bit closer to the pure land of Akshobya. And that's only got to be good because Abharati, the pure land in which he dwells, means great joy. So that's got to be a good thing. So thank you.